Good evening, everybody. Sorry about the little delay. I hope you're all well. It's Thursday. It's Cocktails and Content. I'm Tom Stanhope, and I'll be here for the next half an hour-ish, talking all things video content creation. But not just that. I will be having a little cheeky cocktail alongside it. So, where are we at the moment? How is everybody? I hope everyone's well. I'm just going to put the comments on and make sure I can see you all in the group. So give me just a very short moment and I will make sure this is all live and correct. Oh, it's like, there we go. There I am. So yeah, how are we doing? It's been a busy old week, isn't it? I'm not entirely sure kind of where the week has gone, how it's got to Thursday, but here we are. It's all quite exciting. So make sure this is all live and oops, there we go. I'm back. I apologize for missing last week. I kind of found myself really really missing it. Actually, it's the first one I haven't been able to do in a while, and it always feels a bit funny when I can't do that. But it's one of those things, once you get into a habit, when you break that habit, even if it's just for a week, for the best of reasons, you always feel really kind of guilty about it. But it's really nice to be back. So what are we going to talk about this week? Well, one thing that's been very much on my radar over the last couple of weeks is the idea of visibility. How do we, as content creators or business owners and people who are perhaps wanting to be content creators, how do we do it regularly? How do we, very often the question that's asked is, how do you get in front of the camera in the first place? Because actually it's one of those things that we kind of we put a lot of barriers up for ourselves. And you'll notice, if you've been active in the group the last few days, that it's been a question I've been asking. It's been something I've been touching on more and more, because it's becoming increasingly apparent that this is the #1 thing that stops us from making videos. It's the kind of things that we tell ourselves. Things we say to ourselves like, I'm no good at video. I think I look funny on camera. I always dry up. We come up with all these reasons why we can't do it. And I'd like to do a bit of myth busting again this evening, if I may. And perhaps talk about some strategies and tactics that you can employ to help yourself feel comfortable with video and with the camera. Because I think if you can get over that hump, if you can get over that kind of barrier, then the rest is relatively easy. It becomes a lot less fraught, a lot less kind of anxiety inducing for a lot of people. But this is not just content. It's not chat and content. It is cocktails and content. So I'm going to have a Kir Royale. I know I had it a few weeks ago, but actually I really enjoyed it. And I've actually determined the only drink that I'm having in the week is actually here on Content and Cocktails, because lockdown life, we had a very well stocked cellar at the start of, I say cellar, wine rack. Cellar makes it sound incredibly grand. I don't have a cellar. We had a very well stocked wine rack at the start of lockdown. Now it has nothing in, which is possibly an indicator of a larger issue. So Kir Royale, bit of the old cassis. So it's a very simple, like, in my mind, I'm not sure it entirely qualifies as a cocktail because it's only got a couple of ingredients, but either way, it's a very enjoyable drink to sip on whilst we're bit of fizz. I've gone for pink fizz today. Bit of pink fizz. So tell me if there's anybody watching. Tell me on the replay, on whatever. Give me a shout out. Tell me what you've been up to this week. How's the weather been with you in wherever you are in the country or indeed in the world. Well, here in Plymouth, it's been a sort of bit of an overcast day, and I've been stuck in front of the computer with the old camera on me most of today. But this is enjoyable. I'm enjoying this. So cheers, everybody. Very good. So I've got my notes here. Getting in front of the camera. I put a post in the group a little earlier, just sort of touching on the story, touching on the idea that for me, getting in front of the camera, doing this and doing pre-recorded stuff for years, I've been the person who has been sat behind the camera or stood behind the camera, helping customers, helping clients with their content creation journey, rather than me getting in front of the camera, telling my stories, sharing my knowledge through the medium of video. And that is something that I think a lot of people, certainly in my industry, are kind of, I say guilty, it's not really guilty, it's just one of those things. It's one of the things that we are sort of want to do, because, you know, if we're behind the camera, it's very easy to stay there. And I'll tell you the story. So I started out, some of you will have heard this before. I started out back in 2000 and something, working for a production company called Tapestry Productions. Now, the guy who owned that, guy called John Trace, was very kind. He gave me my first job that I was actually able to take, which I never intended to go into the world of video production. I kind of wanted, from a very young age, I'd wanted to be in the world of art and antiques, and I've been one of those weird kids who went around buying antiques and selling them. You know, I didn't have a bow tie, but I might as well have done. My nickname at school, and please obviously don't tell this to anybody because it's deeply embarrassing, my nickname at school was Lovejoy. 90s, oh god, Lovejoy. Not because of my tight leather trousers or my rich mane of black curly hair, but because of the fact that I was an antique dealer, a child antique dealer. So I'd always wanted to go into that world. Got a job, realised I couldn't physically live on what they were going to pay me as a wage in London. So I had to kind of, had to sort of find other things to do. So I was very fortunate in as much that my brother was doing some work experience for this production company up in the Midlands. I went to go pick him up. Got chatting to John Trace, who was the owner of the business, and he offered me a job, which was cool. So I was in TV and video production, sort of by accident in many ways. And I've always been very aware of how lucky that was, because it can sometimes feel like a very difficult industry to get into in some ways. It certainly was when, 20 years ago, there were quite a lot of barriers to doing that. But the education I was given there was brilliant. I was there primarily to write TV ideas and pitch them and come up with these pitch documents, which would be then sent to TV channels, to commissioning editors, and in theory they would read through them and then comment and sort of give their feedback, which was usually, we don't like the idea, please do something better. Usually. And the process used to be that you'd send in your ideas, and one in every however many hundreds would get picked up as an actual television program. So the production company would then be given money by the channels to create these programs. But whilst I was there, I was offered an opportunity to do some TV presenting. So I made a couple of TV pilots with this company, and somewhere in the archive there are some VHS cassettes of a very young, me in my 20s, presenting for these programs. One was called Attic Antiques, and the other one was a History of Art program. And the Attic Antiques was a sort of David Dickinson sort of style Cash in the Attic knockoff. Now, this was submitted to the commissioning editors, Channel 4, Channel 5. Some of them we didn't hear anything from at all. Channel 4, on the other hand, they wrote back. They wrote back to tell John Trace they loved the idea. They just didn't think that Tom Stanhope was TV gold. Now, you can imagine at the time that was quite a blow to be told that, you know, this isn't your career path. You're not TV gold. You're not what TV's after. And at the time, frankly, you know, I didn't really have any kind of ambitions either way. It was something that I was very fortunate to be able to try, and I sort of realised that I probably knew in my heart of hearts that I wasn't going to be a presenter. But the interesting thing is that actually that kind of solidified something in my mind. From that point onwards, I stuck pretty rigidly behind the camera because I thought, oh well, I've had a definitive answer. I shouldn't be in front of the camera. And that sets you down a path, I think. And whilst not everybody, or very few of you, are going to have had that sort of experience, I think we all take those knocks along the road in business and in our life that kind of can dent our confidence and can make us shy away from being in front of the camera, or indeed just in the limelight generally. And I sort of resolved at that point that I would be a firmly behind the scenes camera. And I remember using the line repeatedly when talking to customers. It's like, no, I'm far happier being behind the camera, making sure that you look the best and that you are getting the best out of this video. And that's great to a point. But the reality is the business world has changed massively. And actually, particularly during these kind of COVID-19 home living lockdown times, we're in a position where you've got to be visible. You can't get out networking. We've got all the social media platforms that make getting visible really easy. We've got, you know, live video functions are kind of here for us all to use. We've got a lot of opportunity to be very visible. And yet so many of us choose to keep hiding ourselves. And this has become really kind of really noticeable in conversations I've had with a lot of business owners over the last kind of year or so, even before all the sort of coronavirus stuff. There's a lot of us out there with really powerful messages, powerful stories, great business ideas, wonderful things that we can communicate and share with people that stay hidden. And even if you're a veteran networker, getting out there every week, or some people are doing it every day, sharing your messages, sometimes that isn't enough. You kind of got to own, you've got to have a solo stage sometimes, because actually in a networking meeting scenario, it's a very noisy environment. You can be there and you can be giving your pitch, but you might have an audience who kind of just unengaged, or kind of their minds are elsewhere, or they're listening to somebody else, they're having conversations. There are challenges to visibility in those kind of situations. Now, a lot of people find the idea of going to networking events horrendous, and I've done loads of them in my time, and I'm still not a huge fan, but I know it does work, and there are lots of ways to do that, more so now than ever, actually, with kind of all the online networking opportunities that have come about. So I'm kind of a big believer now in the value of using video, both live and pre-recorded, to start to own a space. Because success with video doesn't just rely on an understanding of the tech, doesn't just rely on the simple having the right mindset. You know, it doesn't rely simply on having a good strategy. You've got to put all those three things together: the mindset, the strategy, and the technology. They've all got to be there, and they're legs of a stool. Without one of them, the stool will fall over or become, I suppose, very much more difficult to use. So you've got to start to grow each of these to a point where you can be comfortable and confident that you have the know-how. But I think of those three, the one that really how can I put this? The one that really, I think, provides the strongest support is the mindset. So have a think on that for me. Give me a sense of how you feel your content creator mindset is. And what do I mean by that? So it's very easy for me to say the content creator mindset, but what do I mean by that? I mean that, do you have the sort of sense of purpose when it comes to showing up? Do you have the confidence to talk about your message in a way that is articulate and powerful? Can you connect with the audience? But more than any of that, can you be consistent? Can you turn up week in, week out, even when you don't feel like it? And those are things that can feel really hard to do. Hang on, I'm just going to reply to somebody for a second. This idea of mindset, it feels quite a sort of a well-trodden path. And you hear a lot of people talking about sort of mindset and the value of mindset. But what does that mean? What do we mean by that? Because sometimes it can feel a little bit kind of jargony, a bit catchphrasey, a bit sort of memey. But for me, I'll talk about it from my perspective. There are some days when I think, oh God, have I got the energy to go live? There are some times when you just physically can't, like last week, when everything happens in such a way that you physically can't do it. You just can't turn up because there's things in the way. Life sometimes gets in the way, but there are those days where, you feel you might not be feeling it, but actually, how do you set things up so that you do it anyway? And I'm a great believer that we can. Oh, I realised I didn't put my branding on. No, there we go. Thought I'd missed that out. I like this stuff. I like the kind of the little bits of tech. The mindset part of this is kind of is sometimes quite elusive, I think, for a lot of people. And the things that get in our way are those things like a classic one, actually, because I put the post earlier, and Jo Swan was commenting in the group, and she'd said that actually when she looks at herself on video, she thinks she looks young, and she doesn't like the way she sounds, and other things like that. And actually, we all have those. We all have those things that we feel, actually. And when we look at ourselves on video, I think there's a lot of emotions. We feel a lot of different things, and a lot of those things can be quite difficult to process, I think. So I kind of I found this little bit of research a few weeks ago around which kind of tries to get to grips with this reason why when we see ourselves on screen we have a bit of a disconnect. Because I'm looking here, I've got myself, so I've got the StreamYard stream is on this screen, and then I've got the Facebook screen on this screen. Now there's a little bit of a lag between these two screens, but when I look at these, I'm seeing myself in two different ways. So one of them is obviously the one on Facebook, and obviously the other one is kind of as the live on StreamYard. But what both of these images do is they are actually they're presenting it not as a mirror image. but as kind of as I sort of as in a kind of a normally flipped image. It's the kind of image that you wouldn't see in a mirror. It's not a mirrored image. It's just it's a normal video image. Now, of course, when we are looking in a mirror, which is how we see ourselves 99% of the time, that's one of the ways we build our sort of internal image of what we look like. In fact, it's one of the only ways most of us ever do that. You know, we have photographs, but I would say if you will probably look in a mirror every single day, and that's how you build your image of yourself. Now, the mirror image that you look at and get familiar with is not the same image as the image on the screen, because obviously it's flipped. And when we see ourselves on the screen, we're seeing ourselves in that flipped around way to the way we're usually used to seeing us. Now, our faces aren't symmetrical. So, you know, I've got a slightly wonky chin, and, you know, there are my ears. You can see ears are slightly different shapes, but this is normal. Everybody, unless you are some kind of made in a mold supermodel, you are unlikely to have perfectly symmetrical features. And indeed, when people do have perfectly symmetrical features, it can feel a little bit too kind of clean, a little bit sort of mannequin-like. But when we look at that mirror image, and then we look at the image on screen, there's a bit of a disconnect that goes on, because when you look at yourself on screen, there's a part of your brain that says, hang on, that's not quite right. Is that me? Is that me? And so we have this disconnect between the image in our head and the image on screen. And so that's one of the things that makes us feel very uncomfortable. Then we also have the habit, if you are one of those people that tells yourself you are not good on film, you will be looking hard for any evidence that backs up that opinion. You want that confirmation bias. You will always be looking for the evidence that backs up your strongly held belief. You won't be looking at the sort of 99% of the time when you're doing it all really well, when everything is flowing and all the kind of the sort of the flow of the live is there. You will fixate on the moments where things don't go right, or when things aren't quite as they should be, and that will be evidence that you say, well, there you go, I knew it, I'm no good at this. So between sort of a disconnect with how we think we look and how we think we feel, and kind of that sort of confirmation bias where we're always looking for kind of fault, it can be, you know, we can start to put some pretty serious barriers up between us and, you know, being confident, regular, competent creators of video content. The question, of course, is how do we start to overcome this stuff? Well, the first one is really simple. Now, when I look at my image on screen now, I don't get perturbed by it. But when I first started doing it, I was like, oh my God, who is that? Who is that? Because in my head, I'm sort of fixed, or certainly was, with this idea that I'm kind of, you know, I'm 24 years old. I've got a full head of hair. Who is this slightly tired looking older person who isn't me on the screen, yet appears to be talking with my voice? And I think a lot of us have that. We don't necessarily, you know, we don't connect with that image of that person in front of us. But you have to get used to it. If you are going to be a confident and a confident creator, you need to connect with that person on screen and understand that that is how people see you. That is the you that is there in front of everybody every day. And whilst it might not feel commonplace to you, that's who it is to everybody else. So the way you can sort of get comfortable with that is by familiarization first. So if you take a screenshot and print it out of you on screen and pin it up somewhere where you will see it every day, and you look at it and you think something positive whilst you are looking at it, and you get comfortable and confident with you as you are on screen, as you turn up, as people see you. You will very soon start to develop the kind of the idea that is you. That's okay. You are who you are on screen, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what I did. But I did that, and I combined it with actually going live in a private group. So I set up a Facebook group with nobody else in, and I just went live in there, and I talked, and I practiced talking. Because actually, this is, there's nobody listening at the moment. So there's nobody on this live. But I know that tomorrow and the day after and in the weeks and months to come, people will go back and they will watch this content. So I have to assume that there are people watching. They might not be watching right now, but they will be down the line. So I have to kind of get comfortable with the idea of just talking. It's kind of like being a radio presenter, but with the added horror that it is being recorded on video. So that for me is a big one. The other one, and this is an interesting one, and I think I've talked about this before, but I think it's worth reiterating because it's a powerful one. I am looking not at you, though it might look like I'm looking at you. I am looking at a tiny camera on top of my computer. And that's kind of weird, because though it feels like I am talking directly to you, I am not. I am talking to an inanimate object. And the thing about inanimate objects is they don't give you much in return. They are quite difficult to talk to. So how on earth do you sustain a relationship, as it were, with your audience when actually you are looking down the lens of a camera? Because think about when you're having a conversation. Think about when you are talking to an audience, even if you are talking as a member of the to a large audience of people. You're always getting some kind of feedback, and it's not difficult to pick up on kind of emotional cues or physical cues from an audience or an individual. But when you're talking to a camera, it's incredibly difficult. So on a live, this becomes a really pronounced feeling. And actually for some people, and certainly when you start out doing this can feel like an insurmountable issue, because whilst you're talking, you're getting very little feedback. And it's, oh, we've got a viewer. So there's now I know there is an audience. Say hello. If there's somebody out there, say hello. Even if I know there's an audience, I'm not getting anything back unless people comment. So it is yes. So if somebody could comment, for some reason it seems that StreamYard isn't necessarily playing the game. So if somebody could comment, that would be very helpful. So how do you get over this idea that you're not getting any feedback? But again, this comes down to a bit of practice. And this works incidentally for doing pre-record stuff, recording down the lens on a standard camera just as much as it is relevant for talking down the lens on a live. And so that little bit, so when I say down the lens, I obviously mean straight into the camera. So I'm talking down the lens now. Or if I was doing a talking head interview, there'll be someone off camera asking me questions, which is much easier to do, because this is talking to an inanimate object. That is talking to a person, probably. We always, if we've got somebody who kind of is struggling a bit with this, what we'll say is, again, take a picture of your camera, print it off, put it somewhere familiar, and kind of just practice talking to it, or just have the camera up somewhere where you can talk to it every day. It is familiarization, and once you are familiar with it, it will flow pretty easily. These are little, they're not sort of hang on, so I'm just going to reply to a comment. The act of just familiarizing yourself with the kit is really important. It doesn't take much to do, and it doesn't take long to get you to a point where you're kind of where you are I don't know how to describe it. You will feel more fluent if you can stop thinking about this thing, this camera, as an object, and start thinking of it as a way to communicate with an audience and understand there is somebody on the other end of this kind of transaction. You will start to feel much more confident and comfortable about it. And you may look around and you may see other people, your competitors or whoever, or people you really respect, who do this, and they do it effortlessly, almost, without seemingly without thinking. And the only reason that happens is through practice. Nobody is born good at this. There are some people who have a bit more of an aptitude for it, I'd say that's a fact, and we probably understand that's a fact. There are some people who are more confident performers. But if you are talking to an audience that gets you, and this is a point I'll come on to in a second, know your audience. Understanding that not everybody is born with this, and everybody has really had to practice at it, is a really important step. Don't feel bad about sort of about practicing and being on a journey. One of the other things that people kind of get quite worried about is this idea of perfection. This assumption that somehow, if you are doing a live or a pre-recorded video, you have to be perfect. And you don't. In fact, being perfect is a bit creepy, to be honest. If I came on in a perfect space and sat here for 45 minutes or whatever it is, delivering a perfectly worded, uninterrupted stream of information, I think that would be really off-putting. It would make me seem like some kind of robot. This medium is brilliant at building a bridge with people. This is all about building rapport, building people who like and know you and who understand that you are the sort of person for them. And part of that process is showing that you are a natural human being. So mistakes and variation and stumbled words and all these things that make normal conversation, that's fine. Don't worry about it. So I think we're sort of coming to a point where you probably don't want to hear a huge amount more from me. So what I'll do is I'll round this up. If you've got any questions at all about starting your journey to getting visible with video, chuck them in the comments or put them in the group, and we can talk about them in more detail. I can sort of give you a few tips. But what I'd say, if you do nothing else, get yourself set up in a group that's just for yourself, and start to try your lives. Start to try just the simple act of talking, and you will very soon start to feel comfortable with the camera. And once you feel comfortable with the camera, you can then start to build all the other stuff in, like your plan and all those things that we've talked about in this live in the past. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I said, was anybody interested in a downloadable checklist for lives? Well, the great thing is that is now almost ready, and I will be sharing that with the group in the next couple of days. So keep your eyes peeled for that, because that's going to be a useful go live checklist that will give you a step-by-step, blow-by-blow things to do before you go live, to make sure that every live you do is one where you feel comfortable and confident and ready and prepared, because I think that's a big part of it. Feeling ready and prepared is a huge piece of the puzzle. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Tom Stanhope. I help people with video visibility, with getting in front of the camera and getting their message across with video be it lives or pre-recorded. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the group and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you very much for watching. This is Thursday evening. This has been Content and Cocktails. Cheers. I'll see you again next week.